introduced the fiscal reforms. Fiscal reforms mainly included 4 types of important reforms to correct our financial position. So financial position, that is it recover with 4 types of reform. One is the tax reform, and second is that expenditure management, and third is that is restructuring public sector undertakings, and last is that institution reforms. Now we completed the first part, that is tax reform. So based on the tax reforms, which are the important reforms are undertaken by Raja Chellaya committee and other 2 committees, that is now we completed here. So tax reform plus expenditure management plus restructuring of public sector undertakings plus institutional reforms, that is equal to fiscal reforms in India. So now we completed the first point. Now we enter into the second point, expenditure management. How to control expenditure position in India, or how to reduce the expenditure situation. For that purpose, there is a commission appointed to control the expenditure situation, named as Expenditure Reforms Commission. That's government appointed a commission named as Expenditure Reforms Commission. They put forward some of the important measures. This commission introduced so many measures. The first important measure is that reduced government staff. Reduced government staff, that is promoting VRS, voluntary retirement scheme. At the same time, redeployment of surplus staff to government department and other institutions. That is the first measure. The first measure is that according to the recommendation of Expenditure Reforms Commission under the Expenditure Management Reform. That's fiscal reforms. Second important reform is that expenditure management. According to the recommendation of Expenditure Reforms Commission, the first measure is that here there is a reduced government staff. Reduced government staff through the implementation of voluntary retirement scheme, VRS. At the same time, that is here there is a redeployment of excess staff or surplus staff in government department and institution. That is here there is a surplus staff appointed to the government department and institutions, at the same time promoting VRS scheme. Thus it reduced the expenditure of government staff. That is the first important measure. And second measure is that here there is a rationalizing of subsidy, that is fertilizer subsidy. Rationalization of fertilizer subsidy. Fertilizer subsidy is increasing. This may increasing our expenditure. So rationalization of fertilizer subsidy. Fertilizer subsidy is taken into rationalized character. Reducing its subsidy rate. So government avoid or reducing the subsidy rate, it reduce the government expenditure. And third is that introduction of national food security of buffer stock. National food security. At the same time, minimize the cost of, that is buffer stock operation. One side introduce national food security. Food security introduced in the year of 2013. So introduction of national food security, at the same time here there is a reduce the cost of buffer stock. This may increasing, that is government food policy, that is increasing the individual's food security, at the same time reducing government expenditure. For that purpose, introducing national food security and reducing cost of buffer stock, this reduce the expenditure level. So it may avoid the government burden. So reduce the expenditure. And next measure is that phasing out the grant of loans to lost public sector undertakings. Here there is a phasing out. Here there is a gap, providing grant of loans to loss-making public sector undertakings. Here there is a occurrence of losses, or here there is a problems of loss in public sector undertakings. Here there is a gap to provide its support. Here there is a phasing out of grant of loans to the loss of public sector undertakings. If they increase the grant, that is always they depend upon the support. In that case, here there is gap or stage. Phasing out of grant of loans to the loss public sector undertakings. Here there is a need of necessity of support is there. At the same time, phasing out scheme follow, so it may increase their efficiency here. For that purpose, phasing out a grant of loans to the loss making public sector undertaking. And next is that remove the export subsidies. If you remove the export subsidies, they produced better qualitative product. Otherwise, they always depend upon the government expenditure. So, government, the next point is that in the year of, that is 91-92, government remove the exporter subsidies. And last is that restructuring our infrastructure. Restructuring our infrastructure in the form of allowing public-private participation, PPP. Then public-private participation allowed to the social and economic infrastructure. If there is an infrastructure completely depend upon public sector, if most of the infrastructure on public sector, this infrastructure not work in an efficient level. So in that case, allowing public-private participation, this creating more efficient and more profit motive, but that's nature of public sector undertakings like this infrastructure. Infrastructure like transport, communication, banking, insurance, etc. They are allowed to not only the public sector but also allowing private participation. So public-private participation, PPP, P cubed, this may automatically increasing the efficiency of infrastructure. At the same time, most of the infrastructure they are making, that is profit also. These are the expenditure management measures taken by the government to overcome financial problems existed, that is since 1980s or starting with the 1991 new economic policy under fiscal reform. So expenditure management measures are, one is that reduce the staff, and second is the rationalization of fertilizer subsidy, and third is that national food security, at the same time reducing the cost of buffer stock, and next is that phasing out grant of loans to loss making public sector enterprise, that is enterprises or undertaking, and next is that export subsidies removed here, and last is that restructuring our infrastructure, now allowing public-private participation infrastructure. These are the that is important expenditure management measures taken by government to reduce the expenditure, thus it overcome that is fiscal deficit and revenue deficit in India. And third is that restructuring public sector undertakings. Here is the need of restructuring public sector undertakings. You know that most of the public sector undertakings, they are running with losses. To avoid this situation, allowing private participation. That is, the first is that reducing the size of public sector undertakings. Reduce the number of public sector undertakings, at the same time improving private participation. One side, reduce the size of public sector undertakings, at the same time improving private participation, allowing private participation. At the same time, reduce budget support to the public sector undertakings. If there is too much support from the public sector, that's government support or budget support to public sector undertakings, that does not work with efficiently. So, reduce the budget support in public sector undertakings. And next is that privatization of existing public sector undertakings. If there is an existing public sector undertakings allowed to private sector or privatization of existing public sector undertakings. And next is that maximize generation of internal resources. Maximize the that is with the help of internal resources, they work more efficiently. That is utilization of internal resources, that the best measure to improve the position of public sector undertaking. These are the main important points are including in the restructuring of public sector undertaking. The first is that there is reduce the size of public sector undertakings. improving private participation, and third is that reduce budgetary support to public sector undertakings, and fourth is that privatization of existing public sector undertakings, and last is that maximize the generation of internal resources. These are the main important points are included in the restructuring of public sector undertakings. Now we enter into the last point, that is institutional measures. Last is that institutional measures or institutional reforms. Institutional reforms, that is equal to the adoption of monetary and fiscal policies. Adoption of monetary and fiscal policy. In that case, in the case of to control the physical problems, first is that reducing RD and reducing FD. Reducing revenue deficit and reducing fiscal deficit. At the same time, implementing FRBMA, Fiscal Responsibility of Budget Management Act, to attain financial discipline. These are the some of the steps here. That is to attain reducing fiscal deficit and reducing revenue deficit, introduction of FRBMA. FRBMA, that is Fiscal Responsibility Budget Management Act in the year of 2003. Their main purpose is that to attain financial discipline. So, introduction of FRBMA for the purpose of to attain financial discipline, that is to control macro instabilities or to attain balanced situation, introducing FRBMA. So, for based on this, reduce RD and FD, reduce revenue deficit and fiscal deficit. This can overcome the fiscal problems existed in India. In that case, revenue deficit decreased to 0.5% equal to 0.5% or more. That is in each year. Reduce, that is revenue deficit 0.5 to 5% or more. That is equal to 0.5 or more. That's the main aim in the case of reduce FD. Reduce RD, revenue deficit. In the same way, reduce FD to equal to 0.3% or more. 0.3 or more, that is to come down or reducing our FD. That's RD declined to 0.5% or more, then FD equal to 0.3% or more. Though in that cases, reduce FD and RD, definitely it overcome the financial instability or problem here. In the year, that is FD, fiscal deficit 6.2% in 2001, it reduced to 3.6% in 2006-07. 2001 0.2% of fiscal deficit, it declined to 3.6% in 2006-07. In the same way, RD, that is revenue deficit, also come down 4.4% in 2001, it reduced to that is 2.1% in 2006-07. These are the important measures taken by the government to improve, that is to introduce, that is fiscal reform. So fiscal reforms, that is equal to, first is tax reform, and second is expenditure management, and third is that is the restructuring public sector undertakings, and last is the institutional measures. These are the important measures taken by the government to improve the fiscal situations in India. This is one of the important questions in first SEM Indian economy, that is what about the fiscal reforms in India or fiscal reform since 1990. Thank you.